Author note, summary until this point impression a what? Dina's lone thin presence characteristic has been broken. Impression B there's someone that remembers her? Can't be. Impression C it's a lie. Must be some mistake. Impression D it's a lie don ko duan. 2 Dina I'm going to cry if you say any more. Author note end, ___ although Aries and I had some trouble with Agacaro's unexpected statement of I remember Dina, after joining up with Agacaro's, we safely returned to the city. For now, I had made Agacaro's take on a human form. His appearance was that of a human man in his prime wearing a black butler clothing and a monocle on one of his eye. His hair was white and dried up just like that of a goat, all back. His height was most probably around 175-3. It seemed that he was capable of hiding within someone's shadow, and at that moment, he was hiding in my shadow. Hey, you didn't have a skill like that when it was inside the game. Was what I was thinking. However, now that I thought about it, I seem to recall a setting in the game where the devil-type monsters lived in people's shadow. Yeah. While I'm at it, I'm going to check out Agacaro's status. 12 Heavenly Stars Agacaro's level 800 species, Lord Demon attribute, Moon HP, 72000 SP, 10100 STR, Strength/Attack Power 3150 Dex, Dexterity 4148 VIT, Vitality 3453 Int, Intelligence 6183 AGI, Ability/Speed 4140 MND. Mind Power 5280 Luck 3000 FM. Well, a subtle magic type, is what I should say huh. There was no mistake that he was a magic main, but he wasn't too lopsided with his specialization. Well, that was fine as his main role was to use magic to interfere. Therefore, it was quite important that he was not defeated by the enemy. Afterwards, I fixed up Aries' clothes. Even if I was aware that Aries was male, a risque appearance was no good. It was really worrisome that he might be targeted by some strange person. Anyways, it's all nice and all that we've returned, but what should I do? The situation was such that citizens were all enraged, both sides surrounded the castle in the middle and stared down at each other. The debuff should have long been removed, however, there was no sign of the bloodl.u.s.t disappearing from their eyes. Ain't no good at all. They've self-debuffed. Nevertheless, the reason this had yet to turn into a full-on confrontation was that there was a man remonstrating and mediating in the middle. Green. No, maybe it was more accurate to state it as emerald green hair. It might have been well organized normally, however, he looked like he was a mere shadow of his former self with the appearance of someone that had lost all his weight. Clouded blue-colored eyes, and unnecessarily expensive-looking white vestment. Above that, he wore a blue overcoat. And on one side, his large white wing could be seen sticking out. His appearance was quite different from what I remembered, however, there was no mistake. That was one of the 7 heroes, Merak. Just in case, I checked his status. Merak level 500 species, Flugel attribute, Wood CLA.S.S level, Acolyte, 100 Priest, 100 Esper, 100 Archer, 100 Monster Tamer, 100 HP, 55-200 SP, 5301 STR, Strength/Attack Power 3750 Dex, Dexterity 2920 VIT, Vitality 3009 Int, Intelligence 2003 AGI, Ability/Speed 2444 MND, Mind Power 4980 Luck 2711 Bad Status 1 Winged Bad Status Loser's Stigma. You got your wing stolen, huh? I looked at Merak's status using observing eyes and reflexively cast my eyes down. For Flugels, wings were their pride and their standing. If the inside of Merak was in the same situation as I was, he probably would not care much about it. Even if one were to have lost half the organ that they did not originally have, it would finish by merely saying so what. At the very least, they would think that it was better than losing one their arms or legs for. However, if Merak was the original inhabitant from this world. If he was the same as Migrez. In all likelihood, there was no other circuit that was harsher and more severe than this. Even whilst being a hero of the Flugels, he was no longer able to fly. He might be able to substitute it using divine magic. However, substitute Tushan, in the end, was just substitute Tushan. Yes. After defeating the heroes 200 years ago, the Demon King took away a part from each of their bodies. Megrez and Fekta lost their legs. Merak, his wing. Alioth lost his eyes, and for Mizar, it was his arms. Lastly, Dubhi had all his fangs and claws. He did quite a brutal thing, huh? By the way, how about Bennett Nash? She did not predict I.P.8 in the battle itself. After you were gone, she seemed like someone who had lost her soul and stayed in her coffin for a while. What is she doing? I was in a state where I could comment neither on the tragedy that befell them nor on the mystery of why the vampire princess acted the way she did. In the game, we had joked around and called him as the Demon King San, lol. However, when it came to a reality, he was this horrifying of an enemy. Perhaps I should say intimidation as expected of the official last boss. Even if there was no one-shot calling, since he had defeated the heroes who had defeated me, his fighting ability must be higher than mine. 5 Well, if he could be defeated in a one-on-one fight, he couldn't be named the official last boss. Stop, my people. Conflict and hatred are all that the demon race wishes. Why do you not try and grab each other's hands? Merak was desperately trying to mediate, however, there was no effect on the rioters. No, there was probably some effect. If there was not, the civil war would already have started. The mere fact that a hero was standing in the middle already had an effect. However, it was not enough to stop the conflict. With what was happening, I could see something small serving as the last straw to trigger the start of the civil war. Now then, what should I do? That's as far as you go. As I was thinking as such, something broke into the middle of the populace. Yes, broke into, exactly as written. Plunging in a straight line from high up in the sky, cutting through the air whilst resonating a thunderous sound, something dropped onto the ground. Shattering the ground upon impact, someone descended into the place. Of course, there was no need to inquire who it was. Not as a metaphor but in a literal sense, it was an appearance of a doll with a light brown hair. With Skyjet deployed on her shoulders, she was holding on to a very pitiful-looking demon-like man who seemed to have been viciously beaten. It was the entrance of one of the 12 heavenly stars, Libra. So you made it in time, Libra. I unconsciously pumped my fist. It's here, the main golem is here. With it, we can end it. As promised previously, she brought along the demon, so there was nothing more I had to say. Well now, she will fully expose that demon as the mastermind behind everything and end this whole incident. Why, you are. That appearance, could it be? Merak, whom of course, knew about the appearance of Libra, showed a surprised expression on his face. However, Libra stopped Merak with her hand. Furthermore, she followed it up by spouting a white lie. No, I'm just a golem pas. By Brajowski 17. 6 I thought it was Copernicus 4. You could also say that. Oi Libra, don't change your alias. You're even getting Tsukumaidi by some random citizen. She threw the demon that she had been holding down in front of the two camps with a poi and looked around at the surrounding and spoke with a volume loud enough for everyone to be able to hear. Now, do as you please with this man, please enjoy. Wait, what, oi? No one will understand with that. Look, Merak was frozen in place, and even the populace had the face which showed what the H.E.L.L is she saying. You know, he's the mastermind or was the instigator or something like that. Isn't there something else you have to say? However, Libra did not say anything more. The surrounding populace also seemed to be curious about the demon, and a few white-winged men who recognized the face had started turning pale. Nevertheless, leaving things like that would not develop into anything. She's no good at all. She's not suited for persuasion at all. Dina, please do something about it. No one will understand with that. Why, yes. Please leave it up to me. I kept my face hidden and sent Dina forward. It seemed there was no other option but to leave the mediation to her. If only it was possible for me to show myself in front of others, I would have done it myself. Dina jogged into the populace and raised her arm and shouted out, "Attention! Everyone, for now, please calm down and listen to what I have to say. Cutting straight to the chase, the name of the man that is lying here is Jupiter. He is one of the 7 luminaries who serve the Demon King. Amongst the white-winged populace, I believe there are a few people who recognize him. Demon, the archenemy of the humanoids. And even amongst that, it was one of the 7 luminaries who stood at the top as a representative. It was a topic which was more than enough to grab the attention of the people in that place. Her tactic was most probably to start with a statement which would attract attention even if the listener was not interested in what she had to say. The populace's line of sight S.H.I plufted towards Jupiter as if they were nailing him down, followed by a commotion that was of a different type compared to before. Distrust, bewilderment, fear, confusion. A situation where there was someone from the 7 luminaries in this place. Furthermore, he was familiar with the constant idtuance of the city. This fact cooled the heated heads of the people present. Currently, you feel hatred and want to exterminate each other. But pause and think about it for a moment. If something like that happens, who is going to benefit the most? She's good, was what I thought. By stating the main point first, she was able to have an impactful follow-up statement of "You are all just dancing on his palm." In this way, she was able to hammer in a wedge on their actions. It was true that this was more effective in getting through to calm people down who were agitated. The method left people unable to ignore what she had to say. Yes, the ones who will benefit the most are the demons. By having you kill each other, they would be able to bring this country down, and that is their aim. So please, clear your head and think about it. Who is it that you really should be hating? While I was hiding in the shadow, I could not be unaware of the fact that my own face grimaced. An enemy you should hate, huh? Is that how you would word it? Hatred gives birth to nothing was an idiom that I had often heard before. 7 Nevertheless, if people were easily able to bend their emotions and take a loss, no one would ever experience any hards.H.I+P. However, if you diverged or dispersed the vector, the degree of difficulty in tackling the issue was far easier as compared to its counterpart. Psycho.N.A. Lysis of the defense mechanism. One of the tactics, displacement, was in play 8 when a person felt a desire or a craving and they were unable to fulfill it, their minds become unstable. As such, in order to protect their own minds, they would try all sorts of methods to try and fulfill that craving. Currently, the populace wanted to crush the opposing town, they wanted to destroy it. But unfortunately, there was a problem with that. If it was carried out, then the demons would become greatly overjoyed. To that dilemma, the mastermind demon was thrown in with "Please enjoy." The craving which could not be fulfilled, he was the perfect subject in directing their hatred towards. Ah, I know already. It could not be helped. Not to mention, he actually is the mastermind behind everything, so Dina is not wrong. And above all, it was me that had ordered Dina to conduct the way she did. That was why. This was just an emotion. The civilian inside of me was screaming with his emotion and not logic. It was just a boring emotion blurring my judgment. That was how it should have been. UB.A.S.T.A.R.D. As I was thinking that it was unwarranted interference of sentiment, Jupiter, who had been staying quiet this whole time, started shouting in a loud voice. His face was warped with a hatred worse than the citizens from a while ago. He was staring daggers at Dina as if she was the target who had killed his parents. It was probably something like he had finally realized the situation that he was in. It was a little late though. He had probably finally understood that Dina was making him out to be the scapegoat. With an angered look, he screamed out of anger. So that's how it is. No wonder Libra returned so quickly. From the very beginning. From the very beginning, you had planned to trick me. After shouting, Jupiter became one with the wind and charged out. This is not looking that good. I prepared myself at once to be able to get in between them at any time. He was definitely pretty fast. But, compared to me, he's still slow. 9 Even from this distance, I could easily get in between the two whenever I wanted. However, it seems there was no need for me to do that. From behind Jupiter, Libra stuck her arm out, piercing through his body. A. I had already given you the warning that you would be disposed on the spot of if you attack anyone without permission. It. Listen, you guys are. I will not listen. You have already fulfilled the condition of termination. Therefore, I have made a judgment. The promise made of your pet Dutchin to be allowed an audience with my master will now be void. It looked like Libra made a promise to allow him to plead for mercy from me in exchange for calming down. Nevertheless, I had the feeling that he would have been killed by the people of the country before he had gotten to meet me. Actually. Probably not. He was level 300, so he probably would not have died. Or perhaps there was a promise that he would be rescued before he was killed. But by trying to attack Dina, he had broken the promise made with her, and he was disposed of. That was the conjecture reached from listening to the exchange. That's not it. You guys are all deck. By H, Jupiter was trying to say something, however, Libra quickly cut his head off. Oi, so merciless. I did not know whether to say so reliable or I'm glad she's on our side. She proceeded to squash the head that was on the ground with the weight of her foot, then without expression started dusting away the dirt on her skirt. On her face, there was not a strand of emotion nor disturbance. It was not even possible to fetch a reaction at the level one might have received when a nearby bug was killed. Jupiter, who had been squashed to death, pitifully disintegrated in that place, not even leaving a corpse behind. I'm so glad that Libra's on our side. In any event, I was quite curious about what he had shouted in his last seconds. Planned to trick him from the very last. There was no questioning about that. Libra would capture him and stick him in front of the people, bringing his sin in broad daylight and turning the situation around. It was just as planned. But that roar, and the deep resentment he had directed towards Dina. I could not help but feel that there was more to it than what I thought. I really felt as if I had made an oversight. And it definitely was not just my imagination. The White Town and the Black Town had reached a step away from collision previously, but the battle itself was avoided. Nevertheless, if someone were to ask whether the issue was resolved or not, the answer was unfortunately no. Indeed, the collision was avoided, however, the underlying cause for hostility was not addressed in the slightest. On the contrary, the relations H.I plus P between the two sides only worsened. This was due to the fact that, regardless of being induced by the demon, people from the White Town had intentionally formed a volunteer army to attack. And for this point alone, there was nothing that my group could do. Merak was this country's king. As such, as long as he did not brace himself and kept both camps under control, the danger of civil war would continue to be a possibility. I said that with a self-satisfied look of a third party. However, the situation was such that it had developed to the state where we could no longer remain completely uninvolved. Really, you reap what you sow. Considering I was the one who had ordered Libra and Dina to conduct in the way that they did, there was no room for me to feel regret. Notwithstanding, Merak's stare was quite severe. At the time, I was still hiding in the shadow and observing the situation, however, Merak's line of sight was fixed on Libra. Well, I guess, if the golem that was supposedly destroyed casually show up, then anyone would be suspicious of it. As a side note, as golem could only be repaired by the alchemist's skill, unexpectedly, the identity of the one who had repaired Libra would be limited. An alchemist who would purposefully, in this day and age, climb onto the top of the extremely hard-to-conquer tomb, who then repaired and brought Libra out of that place, and proceeded to release fake information about Libra's destruction. Well, I guess the only individuals who could achieve such a feat in this age was Megrez or me. Furthermore, the individual who would actually do something like that. There was only me. Anyways, it was Dina who actually spread the fake information though. For those reasons, it was within my expectation that he would arrive at such a conclusion. Golem over there. Brujowski 17 was it? Nope, I'm Copernicus 4. It really doesn't matter which, but can I get you to come to the castle with me? Of course, if there is anyone that you are accompanying, them as well. Merak's forceful wording left no room for rejection. Yet, without even the slightest change in expression, Libra firmly stated her reply. I refuse. You do not possess the power to issue an order to me. I would appreciate it if you don't say it like that and come with me. The moment Libra replied in a firm manner, Merak became timid for some reason. Oi King too, didn't you become sloppy too quickly? At this rate, unless there was an order from me, Libra will most probably stick with a single phrase, I refuse. Merak was also unable to bring himself to be confident. It couldn't be helped, I guess I needed to take an action. After I decided, I donned a robe, cross-dressed? I've stopped with that, and showed myself in front of Merak's group. Wait. It's a rare invitation from the king. Why don't we accept it this time around? If that is Master's order, I have no objection. Once I came out, Libra easily agreed to go to the castle and went to stand diagonally behind me as if it was a predetermined position. Dina and Ares also stood diagonally behind me and made a "this is everyone" appeal. In truth, Agacaros was inside my shadow, however, there was no need to go out of my way to let them know. I'm really thankful. Well then, let's head off. There are quite a few things I want to talk about. Although Merak was putting up a front because he was in front of his citizens, from the side of his back as he walked in front of us, there was no feeling of any haki or dignity at all. Even Migraz gave off a form of dignity, so what was up with this? The feeling was so bad that Ares also asked, is that person really Merak, quietly. Merak really did not give off the feeling of a king. There was absolutely no feeling of confidence or the sort being given off by him. What about when he was in the game? The Merak that I knew was always calm and stood in the position to remonstrate everyone else. He was by no means self-assertive or outspoken about his views. Nevertheless, he was also not someone that would be carried away by the flow. Indeed, when there was a clash of views, he gently listed out the pros and cons of each opinion for everyone else and guided others. It was the same with the fight. He was never the type to proactively stand at the front. Flugels were a race that was suited to battle, yet they were also a race that had great compatibility to be backline support such as Acolyte. Therefore, there were battle types like me who helped themselves as well as complete backline support players. Amongst the two types of players, Merak was the latter. He himself was neither proactive nor matchless. However, the difficulty of the battle was completely different depending on whether he was at the scene or not. Whatever the situation, he always sent the best possible support at the best possible timing. He read the atmosphere, was how I would put it. For strangely, before we could write down what and when we needed the support, he would always cast the support you wanted at the time you needed. He was that kind of a person. He could always manage the situation, and he always knew what people wanted. That was what I had thought of him. Was that just my overestimation? Maybe it was couldn't go the front instead of could be seen a step away. Maybe it was simply no confidence instead of reserved. Maybe he actually did not have any autonomy even though he looked calm and collected. Maybe he just could not do anything by himself instead of being capable at reading the atmosphere. Is that how it was? Maybe I just thought that he was great on my own and had portrayed and pushed that image onto him. If that was how things were, it might be a bit problematic. I have only ever become a king in the game itself and thus did not know how difficult it was to be a king in actuality. In other words, I was a total amateur. However much I became Rupa's Maffel, I myself was still an ordinary citizen. Notwithstanding, even someone like me knew that a king without confidence was nothing good. Especially now when the fuse had already been lit, having a king that was not assertive was detrimental. Even if it was a little forceful, it was important for the king to show his majesty and keep both sides down. At this rate, this country would really collapse without the demons doing anything. Somehow, it p.i.s.ses me off. Even like this, can you call yourself one of the men that took me down? Please, have a sit. Merak led my group into what looked like his personal room, then poured tea into cups for all of us. I had only ever known and drank tea out of a can or a PET bottle previously, but even I could feel that it was a high-quality tea from the fragrance it gave off. As expected from a king. He had been drinking some good stuff. It's a tea made by the tea leaf imported from Dropnir. I think you will enjoy it. Again, it was a name I did not know of. I took a sip of tea and I plusfted my line of sight to Dina, who was sitting in the chair beside me. When I took such an action, maybe she was predicting that I would do such a thing, she explained to me quietly. It's a country of beastkin, made by the now deceased beast king Dubhi. It's been told the quality of agricultural product from that country is high. Ho! 5 country of scholars Svalin, industrious nation of Blutgong. And now an agricultural nation of Dropnir, huh? One way or another, each country was prominent at something by their own way of life. And this country, by utilizing monster tamers, dairy, and livestock farming, produced and exported out, serving as their main source of income. It's just, they never export out any bird meat. Well, I guess they're kind of a bird themselves. It would be stating the obvious this late, but flugels were humanoids with wings. Although there was no official explanation as to the origin of the flugels, the most influential explanation was the story of descendants of angels. In addition to that story, there was another explanation which stated them to be bird which was transformed by the mana. In other words, it was a cruel explanation which viewed the ancestors of the flugels not as the angels, but more along the lines of pigeons, pelicans, and cranes. More explicitly, the flugels were the beastkin which originated from them. And those beastkins, in turn, had gotten involved with the human to create the flugels. That was the train of thought of some people. Of course, the truth was unknown. However, if that was the case, it would not be strange for there to be more flugels with mixed-colored wings. It was difficult to believe that only the white-winged birds transformed. In any event, if that was the truth, then it would be strange for them to export out birds. It would not be a forgivable act to turn their own ancestors into domestic products and sell them out. Anyways, isn't it enough by now? Would you be able to take your hood off and show me your face? Very well. As there was no one else nearby, even if I showed my face in that place, there would be no problem. I took off the hood that I was wearing as I was told and showed my face. When I did so, Merak became teary and showed an expression that I could not decide whether it was joyful or sad. He then hung his head down. As I thought, it's you. Ruppaz. It's been a long time. You are alive. Seeing that reaction, I was feeling slightly disappointed. I had given a thought about it, but this guy was not a player. He had lived in this world from the very start and was an original inhabitant of this world. He was not a mixed existence like me. On the other hand, you've changed a lot. You became quite weak in the short time I didn't see you. Is that how it appears? Merak gave off a weak laugh to my sentence, which could be taken as an insult depending on how he interpreted. It was a pitiful smile which might be broken at any given moment. That's not it. That's not how it is, Ruppaz. I'm weak from the start. I never had a king's caliber. He grabbed and scrunched his own hair with both his hands and laughed at himself. The appearance of him holding on to his own head was far from what one would imagine of a hero who was called the Sky King. It only gave off the appearance of a young man who had been beaten down to rock bottom. Back then, you were there. Alioth and Dubhi were there, and everyone had stood in front for me. I was just someone that walked behind you guys. He must have really been tired. He was even speaking in a different first-person P.R.O. Noun 6. His mask as the king had completely fallen away, and the sight of it alone made me feel pity for him. This was most probably his true face. Timid and without self-assertion. A young and weak-willed man who matched up with his surroundings. His previous appearance was nothing more than a mask he had frantically kept on. And due to the appearance of someone he knew from the past, that mask was completely peeled away, was how I would word it. Though, I was me and not the Ruppaz that he knew of. Is this person alright? I feel like even if we let him do whatever he wants, he might get a hole in his stomach and die. Yeah. It's also the first time I found out he was this weak-willed. Dina asked me a question with an astonished tone. However, it was also the first time for me to find out that Merak was this kind of a person. This guy, was he really this weak to stress? Megrez was also fairly driven into the corner. However, he was different from Merak. Megrez sought abuse and disdain, but it could also be said that he was loved to the extent that he could wish for those yet still not receive them. In other words, whatever people wanted to say, Megrez had properly unified his country and was loved by them. Megrez was all that. However, if Merak did something like that, he might die from stress. It's bad. 7 heroes are super troublesome. I should not have become a king, you should have remained as the king. AAA, why did I become an enemy and fight with you 200 years ago? I should have been the one to die. At that time, I shouldn't have won. As I left him alone, he started falling further and further into a deep end, reaching to the point where he started muttering. This guy is not good, he might really end up committing suicide. Can't be helped. I'll give him some shock therapy. I don't like nor am I good at giving lectures, but, if Merak doesn't hang on, this country will really collapse. I stood up from my seat and rudely barged in front of him. I then kicked the chair Merak was sitting in and made him fall onto the ground. It was an act where if I had kicked the wrong place, it might have gotten ugly. Nevertheless, because his HP was well over 10,000, even if it had landed, it would not have done much damage at all. It was weird to be saying at the time like this, however, it was a fantasy manze 7 shut up, fool. I've been listening for the whole time, but you've just been saying whatever the h.e.l.l you want. You dare call me a clown that was accidentally defeated. I was not the Ruppas that this guy knew. However, those final few words I said back then, or more like typed, were also the words that Ruppas had said out loud, then she most probably would not feel regret about the loss itself. Notwithstanding, to think that the winning side felt regret to the point of eventually muttering it was wrong to have won. With such a situation, Ruppas would be turning in her grave and I also would not be able to stomach it. If the winner said such a thing, then there's no face remaining for the loser. Hey, was I a clown that was defeated by mistake, huh? There was no option but to think of it like that. That was why I grabbed onto Merak's collar and forcibly pulled on him to make him stand up. Be proud. Stand up high. You are the man who defeated this Ruppas Moffel. I will not accept you acting pitifully. Exactly, there was no way I could accept it. If the winner was this pitiful, Ruppas could not be saved. After he was lifted up by me, Merak was looking dumbfounded. However, after a while, his well-featured face was distorted and started sobbing from both his eyes. I can't be your match, huh? Not against you. You haven't changed, just like 200 years ago, exactly the same, still always full of confidence. Even like this, I've changed a bit. I released Merak and let him sit on the chair. Uncharacteristically, I spouted out arrogant things, but I did not think I had said anything wrong. Having said that, after saying something so boastful, it was a bit embarrassing. I could no longer just go back and sit on the chair again with how the things had developed, thus I decided to quickly leave the place. This country is yours. I will not help you further nor would I let you ask for help. For the rest of the problems, show me that you can sort things out on your own, the Sky King. As I quickly turned my back to him and left, Dina and the group also followed. There was nothing more for me to say nor for me to do. Even if we had solved the issue, the king would still be Merak. In any event, unless Merak decided to believe in himself and acquire some confidence, something similar was bound to happen again. You won against me. Show me that you can solve something this small. Don't turn me into a fool. Author note, Merak, but really, I don't have the confidence to unify the country, and even if I try to act with dignity it's just embarrassing, and everyone will hate me, and everything I do will be fruitless, and my luck is bad, and I lost to the Demon King, and Bennett Nash will call me incompetent, and she ignores my call for cooperation, and look, I don't look commanding, and saying stand up and stick your chest out is easy, but even if I get carried away with phrases like that, I'll just be in trouble, and it's not suited for me, and more like I can't, probably can't, and more like impossible. Mumble. Ruppa's 7 heroes are superior bothersome. Author note end, 1 https://n.wikipedia.org/wiki/loop. 2 I made a note about having many types of king under J.A. Panes before. This time, the king is literally country king. 3 Hacky, explained new chapters ago when I explained about King and Ha. This haki is exactly the word used in One Piece. Literally meaning, will, spirit or ambition. 4. Is a famous J.A. Payne's phrase. Literally meaning reading the air. But English equivalent would be reading the atmosphere. For this scene, it might be closer to reading the situation though. 5. Sound made in J.A. Payne's when you're impressed. If I had to put it in words, it'll be something like "is that so?" with a positive meaning and tone. 6. In Chapter 17's comment section I wrote a short explanation of all the I in J.A. Payne's, but here is copy-paste of the relevant part of that comment. Also, for this line, Merak usually use watas.h.I+, but now he used boku. Commonly used ones, watas.h.I+/wetakus.h.I+ equals common, more soft-spoken, more feminine but can be used gender-neutrally, go-to word for women, used in business/formal aspect by both gender etc. atas.h.I+ equals slightly altered version of watas.h.I+. I've only ever heard this used by adolescent girls in school. Boku equals common, more soft-spoken, polite version of I that the male gender use. Go-to word for younger boys, as well as an adult male is trying not to step out of line, though, often watas.h.I+ in a gender-neutral form is used instead, or equals common, masculine version of I. A bit more haughty than 3 so far. Go-to word for most older male, honestly probably starting like primary school when cooler boys start wanting to look cool, it's probably the most common I for male emo, don't quote me on that. This is the version MC used to refer to himself when thinking. Was.h.I+/WA. You often see this used by older generations, maybe like 3 or 4 generations back, especially by older, great-grandfathers. Often used in theatrical plays or young children trying to show they're acting like their old, great-grandparents. Few others in between relating to the current context, Wurwa, where, a haughty version of female I, a user places themselves at the very top and sees others to be below them. Boahank.o.c.k, the Sea Empress from One Piece uses this version, edit apparently it was also used in a humbling way by the wives of a samurai. Yo, the I that's used by MC when he's speaking as Ruppas. The male counterpart of Wurwa. More so than a king, it's a form that is used to show their high position. The aristocratic system is a Western system, but if there were kings, dukes, earls, counts, marquis, or those fictional haughty evil fat conglomerate merchants, I imagine J.A. Payne's translation would most likely use this one. 7. Okay, so, this is a dajere or bad pun in J.A. Payne's. In J.A. Payne's, the number 10000 is p.r.o. Nounced one man, and fantasy manze is written as, if you look at how it's written, fantasy's last part and manze's first part corresponds to 10000, i.e. a pun/dajere. Manze is a skit which is usually done whilst standing, thus stand-up comedy on J.A. Payne's television. I explained Tsukumai from few chapters ago, and in those skits, the reply is sometime at Tsukumai in a dajere style. Yeah, it's complicated. Here, Ruppas literally stood up and kicked the chair and said his HP is over 1 man, thus this situation was like a fantasy manze. It's hard to explain, but it's just using the words in manze literally, to stand up, and as a pun. It was a dark capital city. The kingdom of Mjolnir for the vampire race was shrouded in darkness as if daytime didn't exist. One they called themselves the rulers of the night, and even amongst the humanoids, they had the highest affinity with the Ma, thus if anything, they were closer to demons than humans. In the middle of the kingdom, a crimson-red palace soared high. And on its highest floor resided their eternal master, the vampire princess. The only individual the vampires swore their loyalty to, whether it be the past, present or the future, was this beautiful king. They did not even have the black-winged supreme ruler or the demon king in mind. They lived solely to serve the vampire princess, and should she tell them to die, they would die with pleasure. AH.O.A.RD of fanatics who were not even scared of death. Those were the citizens who resided in this Mjolnir. At this moment, on the throne of the palace sat a young girl, and in front of her was a single vampire who kneeled down. Reporting in. As your highness stated, Svalin was indeed liberated from the 7 luminaries' threat, and the whereabouts of Aries of the 12 heavenly stars was concealed. As I expected. That Migres, he made a mistake of choosing not to inform me. Largely, he was trying to stand up for someone, but such action only tells me she was there. Careless, isn't he? A young girl who was sitting on the throne laughed with a kusuri. 2 The hair that was flowing down was platinum colored. 3 Her pupils that split vertically was scarlet red. 4 Her fangs were peeking out from between her lips, and her outer appearance was that of a mere 14-year-old girl. However, for vampires who could live for eternity, age by appearance was meaningless. I've waited too long, AAA, I've waited for 200 years, my arch-rival. If it was you, I knew for sure that you would definitely come back from Hell. A young girl said with great joy and stood up from her throne. She walked as she stroked her hair, and the black mantle she was wearing waved in a match with her movement. After reaching in front of a window which overlooked the whole kingdom, she gazed up at the sky as if she was love-struck. I'm waiting anxiously for you, Muffle. If I don't Serpa.s.su, my time won't pass. Ever since the moment you disappeared in the past, my time remained frozen. 5 The corner of her mouth curled and her fangs became bare. Her scarlet red eyes showed a fiery glint and strength went into her fists as if she could not wait a moment more for the battle. Who cares about the flock of weaklings called demons? The Demon King? Like I care. He can do whatever the H.E.L.L he wants. Future of humanoids? Yeah, I really don't care because I'm not interested in them. If you're going to perish, go ahead and perish on your own. You get killed because you guys are weak. The weaklings might cry why I'm not helping, but I don't know, nor do I hear them. I also don't have any intention to listen to them. They're simply worthless. The world is always controlled by the strong. Only the handful of prodigies possess the right to dictate the future of the world. I have absolutely no interest in the weaklings and incompetent fools. There is only one person captured by these scarlet eyes. That black-winged angel alone, my arch-rival, and my long-time enemy. Let's settle things properly this time. Without anyone interfering, with just you and me. The one who will rule this world is not you. It's also not the Demon King. I'll make you feel the humiliation of defeat and teach you the ruler of this world is going to be this vampire princess Benitnas. Plus, without fail, I'll be the one to kill you. Rupa's Muffle. Saying that, the young girl, Benitnash, held her palm towards the sky. The conclusion that could not have been reached on that day 200 years ago. This time for sure. Yes, whilst feeling a strong desire, *HAAAA. As I was leaving the country of Gillerhorn due to having nothing left to do, I made a deep sigh. I ended up boasting quite a bit. That's going to become a part of my dark past. That probably might have looked quite uncool from the bystander's point of view. Is anything wrong, Master? No, I was just thinking that I had spoken out of character. I had shown something uncool. I do not believe it was. It was an awe-inspiring event that should be saved in my eternal memory. It is truly unfortunate that we are not able to leave the moment in a visual format. I trembled at the words "save for eternity" that came out of Libra's mouth. I did not know if it was as a photo or a video, but either way, the result would be no different from having a public execution. Though, since she said unfortunate, it looked like she did not get to do so. However, I decided to check with her just in case. Libra. Do not tell me that you took a photo or something of that incident. If you have it saved, immediately dispose of it. I posed a question to her, but there was no answer or reply from her. Libra would usually reply instantly, but this time alone, surprisingly, she seemed to be hesitating. What is it? She doesn't want to dispose of it that much? That was what I was thinking, but a reply that I was not expecting at all came from her. What is a photo? 6 To Libra's reply, I froze a little. That makes sense. There's no such thing as a photograph in this world to begin with. Of course, even if I asked Libra, she would not understand what it was. Just in case, I had a look at Aries. It seemed that he also did not know what it was from the way he looked as he shook his head. Looking at his reaction, I was satisfied that there really was no such thing as a photograph in this world. It's a strange feeling, was what I thought at the time. It really gave off a feeling of fantasy when a metallic golem like Libra, who was plainly superior in technological advancement even compared to the modern world, existed, yet photographs did not exist. Well, in actuality, Libra was an existence made by the skill of an alchemist, and thus she was technically not mechanical. In that way, maybe it was not so strange? However, something did not sit well. I felt as though I missed something. What was it? What did I forget? What did I miss? Remember? Yeah, it was on the first day back when I arrived at this world. But those were events of 200 years ago. In this world where there's no photography, I doubt anyone would be able to recognize me. Naive, that's too naive, Rupa-sama. This trading city is where people of every corner of the world gather, you know? And races with long lifespans like elves aren't exceptions. They may still remember you clearly. 7. I flexibly looked at Dina. There's no mistake. She knows. Dina has knowledge about photograph which did not exist in this world. Perhaps this Dina also realized her own slip-up. She quickly looked at my direction with a face where she was struck with a sudden realization. There was no room for doubt. It was certain. She was Black 8. I did not know why or how, but I knew that Dina was an irregular just like me. At the very least, she had the knowledge of the other world. Dina. There are some things I want to talk to you about with just the two of us. Can I get you to come with me? Yes. I will not let you say no. What I was thinking was not wrong. That's right, I had always overlooked Dina. I would have known if I had thought about it a little. Or perhaps it was that I, myself, looked away. She was an advisor NPC that not even I could remember. Ah, yeah, of course, it was there. I do remember setting down a background object with no combat ability. However, for something like that, Dina was too competent. She had an ability that would not dishonor the position of an advisor. Furthermore, it was impossible that people like Ares or Migres could not recall her existence at all. I took Dina along and went further into the forest. Ares and Libra tried to come along, but I stopped them. It was a discussion that I should speak privately with Dina. Therefore, I also left Agacaros where Ares and Libra was and double-checked to make sure that no one was in the surrounding. With it, I was able to take my time to speak freely. Now then, what should I start with? No, let's not take a roundabout route. I'll cut straight to the chase. You, what are you? The story about you being the advisor which existed from 200 years ago, that was a lie, right? Yes, it was a lie. To my question, Dina answered in a clear reply without any form of deception. As I expected. Dina was not a mere background NPC. She was just someone who was using that position as a cover. Of course, she was. Because that tower was dirty. It clearly contradicted Dina's words on how she was living and waiting in that tower for the past 200 years. It was possible that she was waiting with her position without cleaning the tower, but that would be a bit strange in the situation. If she was waiting for her master to come back, she should and would have at least kept the top floor clean. And yet, for her to not do such a thing means she was not living there for the past 200 years. If you thought about it like that, one would easily be able to fit the pieces together. Yeah, it was something simple that I should have figured it out. But I did not figure things out. I pretended to not fit the pieces together. I had unconsciously looked the other way. Because I did not want to know, I did not want to figure things out. Who are you? A citizen under my rule. That's not it. If that was the case, it would be left in Libra's memory. At the very least, you are not something who had entered that tower until the moment I was sealed. It is as you say. I am neither your advisor nor your subordinate. I was merely someone who found out about that tower's setting on the NPC and exploited that information. NPC, huh? Looks like. She finally decided to stop hiding things, this woman. Nevertheless, that raised a question on its own. Assuming that she was a player, if she had enough influence to enter the tower, then it would not be strange for Libra to remember her. Additionally, when Aries first saw Dina, he initially had no recollection of her, but was able to recognize that she was the advisor. What was? No, that's right. Dina had that thing. You tricked Aries and Agacaros with memory manipulation, right? Yes. Aries was back when we first met and cornered him. Agacaros was, since we were cooperating with the demons, it was during the time we were in their castle. I altered and inserted a fake memory to them respectively. The reason the golems were not able to recognize you as an ally, was because memory manipulation did not work on them. It is as you say. Golem do not have memories, only data. Therefore, a vague skill like memory manipulation does not work on them. Memory manipulation skill that worked even on high levels, huh? She really possessed an ill-natured skill. Which meant, there was also a possibility that I was also being manipulated myself. Not only that, she said demon race's castle? I finally understood, I was gradually starting to see what was going on. Her real ident. Out of curiosity, how much of my memory did you fiddle with? I could not do it. What? Your ego and will are far stronger than you would like to believe yourself. Even assuming that it was possible to plant a fake memory in you, to achieve such a feat, I would need to continually cast the spell on you for at least a year without rest. That was why I had to fake being your advisor NPC to fool you. The only thing that barely managed to influence was to make you unconsciously avoid doubting me. It was only possible to guide your thoughts a little. So my memory had not been fiddled with, huh? I did not know to what extent she was telling the truth, however, it was a reasonable argument to say she would have no reason to fake being in that risky position if she could tamper with my memory. All she had to do was to impersonate one of my citizens. Or was it her aim to make me think that way? Since you know about that, you're a player, right? Honestly, I was surprised. To think that other than me, and even more, Rapasama was a player. It really was my miscalculation. With a cute motion, Dina made a sharp evil smile. It was significantly different from the HiCLA.S smile that she had been making until now. Notwithstanding, it was a smile that was strangely fitting of her. It seemed like this was her real face. Also, I'll like to make one correction. I am not a player. What? To put things accurately, I am a test player. I was a test player hired for the purpose of testing out the half-elf race that was supposed to be added in the future patch. Is that the reason you know about the inside of the tower? Yes. From the administrator's computers, even if you are not a citizen of a country, you could peek a look at the player's power and their inner setting. I found out about that advisor NPC from there. Hey, are those the things that test player should be able to look at? I'm guessing she looked at those things without permission. How did she not get fired after all that? And what do you mean by manipulating the memory of Agacaros at the demon's castle? That only tells me you are able to freely enter their castle. That's exactly what I'm saying, Rapasama. I stand in the position to be able to freely enter the demon race's castle at will. After saying that, Dina changed. Her ocean blue hair turned into a vibrant gold color and her calm and gentle face turned belligerent. Her lips curled into an arc and her eyes became thin. It truly changed into a face that I had never seen before. Originally, I planned to continue acting out as your advisor, guiding you until you and the Demon King crushed each other. Having said that, now that it's come to this, that plan seems like I underestimated you too much. Therefore, allow me to use an alternative method. Ho! I'll make you submit to me here and turn you into my PAWN. I still need you to be useful, my loving master. The pressure given off by Dina significantly rose up. Due to the pressure of her magical powers, trees in the surrounding trembled and the earth vibrated. This is quite impressive. There was no question of it, the pressure given off by her was the greatest I had felt ever since I arrived in this world. Can you do it? With your level 300. Aha. Ahahahaha. You still believe in that? Something like that, of course it was a lie. That was also another feature to be introduced in the future patch. A simple skill to conceal your status by setting a false status. It was a known fact from before that observing eyes was far too convenient. For the purpose of balancing things out, it's only reasonable that there would be a skill to counter that. In other words, your real level is. Of course, is there even need for me to say it? I'm level 1000 just like you. The transformation finished. The person that was standing in front of me had the same facial features as Dina, yet was definitely a different person. DOS.H.I plus NG gold hair and a magic power that was Gas.H.I plus NG out. And even after she stopped her deception, her beautiful countenance was not affected by her belligerence in the slightest. Allow me to reintroduce myself. I am Venus, one of the Demon's 7 luminaries, Venus of the Metal. Nice to meet you. She spread her arms like in a crucifixions and smiled as if she was mocking everything. Now then, let's kill each other. My lovely master, Rupas Moffel. __, author note, vampire reporting. Super SA ___ in person appeared in Toto, star. 9 Bennett Doe. Run away. Vampire Yawoot. This time's T.'s job was to create a rival role and to show face Bennett Nash's face, and Dina's true nature. 10 I was thinking from the very beginning that there should at least be one person from the 7 heroes that would be hostile to Rupas, so Benetta is an enemy character. Priority target is Rupas while you can't pas.s rest. If there's the Demon King in front of her eyes, and Rupas was 100m in front of her, she will ignore the Demon King and head towards Rupas with full speed. She is physically more troublesome than Merak. But if you reconcile with her properly, she might don't misunderstand Ruplato. It's not like I'm here to help you out or anything and become a tsundere completely. Nah, that's totally impossible. Dina suddenly showing her true nature seems too forced and planned out? Maybe it's just your imagination. It's not like I'm hiding anything. Author note end, __1 here the Ra said, morning and afternoon. In J.A.Pan, the day is more commonly divided into 3, morning, afternoon, night, and not 4, morning, afternoon, evening, night, as evening is often just called night. Of course, there are words for evening, but there's always other use or meaning out of that, e.g. last night, yesterday evening, dusk, dawn, twilight, night. 2 chuckleish laugh, just imagine a laughing animation that you think fits Kusuri. Yeah, J.A. Pains is very descriptive. 3 think silver. 4 I imagine like a cat. 5 you here is Kisama. Very rude version of you. Also used to look down on others in some context. 6 Ro used cs.h.I plus n. Shas.h.I plus n is photo but written in katakana, as opposed to shas.h.I plus n, written in kanji. Think of it as a normal word like alphabet or phonetic/syllable. 7 2 sentences are from chapter 4. With Shuram's permission, translation for these 2 sentences have been taken from chapter 4 to keep things consistent. Do note picture has been changed to photograph to better fit with the context. 8 Guilty 9 Dragon B.A.L.L.SZ reference 10 OK, is part of the Ra. Also, in case you haven't noticed, the author seems to be referring to himself as Vegeta in the end of chapter author notes as well as Easter egg in the middle of some chapter. I.e. breaking the 4th wall. __. Now then, let's kill each other. My lovely master, Rupas Moffel. Dina flew up high and shouted out all the while release a gold-colored light from her whole body. That instant, there appeared thousands or perhaps tens of thousands, a number simple too futile to count of metal attribute raindrops. It was a lump of metal that individually was not worth even catching. However, it was a different story if you were to be showered by them all at once. Needless to say, if you were a normal person, you would be turned into minced meat. Countless steel bullets filled the air and in the next moment, Dina brought her hands down. Come forth, maidens whom I call. With thy daunting power, crush everything in heaven and earth Cleta. 2p.r.o. Noun cement. In that instant, all the metallic raindrops stormed down. As if shot by a Vulcan cannon, everything on the earth was shattered, shaved away and pulverized. 3 This, with something like this, I guessed even I would have to take some damage? No, let's not concern myself with this. I will just break through this. By using the intuition and senses of Rupas within me, it charged into the metallic rain as if they were rocks to be shattered. Of course, a metallic blizzard blew against my whole body. It was painful. But it was not something I could not endure. I swung my wings strongly, creating a gust of wind to blow away all the metallic raindrops. It's my turn this time. I trans.m.u.ted many swords and shattered them into countless blades using alchemist's skill. I then proceeded to launch them all towards Dina. However, Dina did not change her expression nor move from her position and proceeded to call out the magic X-Gate. What opened in front of Dina was, I should call it a, hole in S.P.A.ce. As if there was a hole in the sky, it was an unrealistic sight to behold. It definitely felt strange and surreal. The sky was not something that was made to open a hole. Yet, in that place was something that could not be described as anything other than a hole, and that hole sucked in all the blades that he had launched. That being said, the metal attribute was quite interesting. It was similar to alchemy to an extent, yet it was something different from it. The basis of alchemy is to combine. It was to combine various materials that originally exists into something else. But metal attribute arcane magic was different. It was used to give birth to a metal. Arcane magic could transform mana into a phenomenon. That was the setting under this world. For example, fire or water created by arcane magic was not different in substance when compared to the real ones. Nevertheless, fundamentally, they were mana and not real fire or water. Therefore, it was impossible to create a golem out of theater created by the arcane magic. Correction, technically it was possible to create the golem, but they would disappear very quickly. To create a golem out of magic power would be impossible unless a person had an infinite amount of SP anyways. What I was trying to say was that the difference was whether the created product was water or metallic. In any event, to see a solid product being created in front of my own eyes was quite absurd. As for the X-Gate, I really can't understand it. Moon was the attribute that was A.S. associated with S.P.A.ce and time, but Dina's affinity was with metal. Perhaps it was a magic that was not restricted to a specific attribute. Furthermore, back in the game, this magic existed only in the lore. Notwithstanding, even though Dina was a player just like me, she was able to utilize that skill. Was it a skill that was learned in these 200 years, or was it a skill that would have been implemented in the next update? Whichever it was, there was no way for me to find out at this moment. Are you daydreaming? You seem to have quite a lot of leeway. Dina sent the blade that I had previously used back at me. Tisk, so you can redirect the vector of the things you sucked up, huh? Additionally, by teleporting to a new location, Dina was able to create distance between us and send in the next magic. Aglaya. For light so bright that it blinded you, was that what you would call something like this? Aurora covered the surroundings so brightly that I could not help but shut my eyes. But the damage was negligible. It was not something that could penetrate past my defense. By the time my vision recovered, Dina had already switched and commenced her second attack. Oxo. 5. The rain kept falling everywhere in the surrounding. The rain itself did not have any power or effect. The problem was with the earth that had bathed in that rain. Trees started sprouting from every available S.P.A.ce and grew so high up into the sky. Those trees then became like whips and started attacking me. Tisk. I punched, snapped and kicked at the large trees coming towards me. I then flew high up into the air to avoid the trees that continued to grow without bound. Next moment, I nosedived. I used a grappler's skill meteor kick to pierce into the ground, and just as the name would suggest, uproot and blew away all the trees. I then proceeded to grab one of the trees that I had snapped and threw it towards Dina. Of course, she escaped by teleporting away. However, I flew on and closed in on her by aiming at the location that she reappeared at. Fast. I used a normal attack as a probe at the surprised Dina. Dina managed to avoid the attack by quickly twisting her body a bit and countered by slapping towards my face with the back of her hand. But something like that won't work, you know. It did not hurt me one bit. No, I thought, without a doubt, it had more than enough power when compared to a random small fries attack. The one I had previously fought. Who was it again? That guy that was buzzing around me. That fire attribute guy from the 7 Luminaries. Yeah, never mind about the name of a guy like that, it really doesn't matter anyway. In any event, this could not be compared to a guy like that. Getting back on the topic, even if 2 players were of the same level, each player would have their strong and weak points. That is Tosai, even if the original Megrez or Merak punched me with all their might, I would not have taken much damage at all. 6 Magic type is a magic type. The frontliner is a frontliner 7. This was even more so since my character's stats were buffed up by doping. My apologies, but just because the enemy was level 1000 did not mean they would be able to fight fairly with me. Let alone 10%, I did not think a physical attack from a backline player would even do 1% of my max HP 8. I struck my palm into Dina's ribcage and activated the Blunt Edge Strike skill 9 when it hit her. Her body flew away in a funny Fuzz.H.I+ on end mode down the trees that were in her path. Notwithstanding, it was clear that she was still at maximum level. She spun around in the air once and proceeded to softly landed on the ground. However, her facial expression showed some of her impatience and irritation that she could not manage to hide. Haha, I see. As expected. As expected of Rupa's Maffle. With just own attack it took away quite a lot from me. Why don't we stop here, Dina? Someone like you won't be able to win against me. If I had to describe myself bluntly, I would be a natural enemy to all the magic types. The mantle I was wearing reduced the effect of all attributes behalf. Thus, an arcane magic attack that did not have no attribute was unable to do any significant damage on me. Furthermore, due to the dress that I had equipped, I was immune to any status defect which might have been associated with attributes. Additionally, due to the Strider CLA.S.S's gap closer skills, I was able to quickly get close to the enemy and dish out high physical damage attacks that the magic types disliked. 10 Naturally, as a level 1000 backline player, they would have prepared ways to counter melee players. Indeed, it was a fact that someone like Megrez was completely fine even if the enemy frontline got too close to him. There was some rare exception like Libra that he could not handle through. But Dina was not prepared. It was true that her level was equal to mine. However, she had neither the knowledge about the theory on how to counter the melee players nor the practical experience in her gameplay to spontaneously execute that theory in real combat. And of course it was like that. It was because she was a test player. She was not like us who actually played the game up to our level. All she was required to do was to test the balance of the abilities in the game 11. As such, she had no reason to figure out how to escape from a melee player as a support player. She would neither have found loopholes nor researched which pairing was a good or bad match in a fight. She also would not have done something bothersome like doping during a test play. Oh, how kind of you. Are you saying that you will forgive someone like me who had deceived you all this time? It's a fact that you were deceiving me this whole time, but it's also a fact that I was helped by you as well. In any event, I think it was me fault for being foolish enough to be deceived. I praise your ability on being able to do such a thing, so I don't feel resentment towards you. Exactly, I felt no anger towards Dina. Yes, I was shocked that I was being deceived this whole time, but that was it. Ultimately, even now in the end, she was still included as one of the people that I hoped to protect. She was deceiving me, using me. Yeah, that was exactly how it was. But so what? I was not going to hate her just because of something like that. I did not have such a heart that would falter from being deceived once. Why don't you talk to me about it? The reason that you had to take such a troublesome and roundabout way to get me to fight the Demon King. Do you think that you've already won? I think you're jumping to a conclusion. Please leave remarks like that after you survive this attack. Dina's eyes shone brightly and she spread her arms wide. The next moment, the land started rumbling and the trees started collapsing. The waves of pressure given off by her magic power alone made the sensation of wind created by Jupiter look like a gentle breeze. It seemed like she still had a hidden trump card left. X-Gate summon? What is it at this time? When I murmured, I noticed that my surrounding had suddenly gotten dark. What the? Did the weather suddenly change? I looked up as that thought was running through my head, and just a little. I regretted it. Yeah. Nah, this was. You know. This is. Such a fierce thing. There was a Ma.S.Civ gate deployed in the air. That was fine. That was within acceptable range. The question was the thing that was coming out of the gate. A gigantic globe giving off the golden S.H.I plus NE was probably not real. If it really was actually coming down, I would not be able to see that thing falling down at me as golden. To begin with, I probably would not be able to recognize that thing as a spherical object. Even with all that, the size of that thing was beyond the norm. The diameter of that thing was probably a few hundred meters. I would like to believe that thing didn't reach a kilometer, but she had most likely created it very high up in the sky using metal attribute arcane magic and brought it here using X-Gate. What was falling down from the sky was Venus, a planet that was S.H.I plus Ning bright gold. Dawnstar 12 matching with Dina's yell, a small planet closed in onto the ground with a thundering sound. It. A little. That totally looks like something that'll involve the country of Gjallarhorn as collateral. Not to mention that magic was famous for being hard to utilize well because it was something that should have taken a few seconds after it was cast before it started coming down back in the game. Yet, to use an X-Gate to bypass S.S that and fast forward is a little bit unfair, don't you think? She had probably thought that she would not be able to defeat me unless she did something like this, and honestly, she went a little overboard. Having said that, it didn't look like I had the option to just run away. If I ran away, the country of Gjallarhorn would really collapse and Merak would die. Ares and others will probably be able to endure through this normally, but I did not really feel like just letting it drop on its own. Therefore. Very well. I accept your challenge, Dina. From the start, there was only one thing that I could do. If there was a subordinate that had made a mistake, I would punch them back until they were rational and then stick my hands out for them to grab. I was not good at thinking from the very start. I don't mean to brag, but I was never one of those people who were intelligent to begin with. So the things that someone like me could do was limited, and likewise, it was evident. At the very least, I should expand my full effort in the commitment of those limited options I could take. It was the same this time. It was not going to be an exception. I gripped my fist tightly and looked up into the sky. It gave off the feeling of oppression that made me want to run away, but strangely, I felt absolutely no fear at all. Most probably, the Rupas inside of me was saying that she could do it. And I myself was strangely excited about what was about to happen, as my heart was pumping so violently that I felt my whole body vibrate. I noticed that the muscles in my own cheek loosened into a smile and thus understood that I was probably laughing at that moment. Flight. I kicked the ground all my might and flapped my wings with all the power that I could muster. Accelerate, accelerate, accelerate. Sound barrier, annoying, get out of the way. Something like the sound was just a foolish and sluggish thing and I had no intention of waiting ages for it to arrive. They should just stay behind where they were. As the scenery flowed past in a ridiculous speed, I put all the power that I had into my right fist. Grappler's skill Iron Fist. 13 It was a skill that raised the attack power of the fist based proportionally to the level of the CLA.S.S. Furthermore, the skill was paired with the defense penetration effect A.S. associated with the penetrate weak spot. The rest was based solely on my power. All I had to do was believe in my own body and my right punch. I punched it. My apologies for not being able to describe it in a stylish and fanciful way, but that was all that could be described. I was not good at unnecessarily describing things in vivid or colorful phrases, and since all that I did was punch, I could only explain it as I punched. And that was enough. The small planet that I punched ignored the laws of physics and flew away into the sky, proceeding to shatter into pieces. When that happened, as the miniature Venus was unable to maintain its form, it was broken back down into main and disintegrated as if it never existed in the first place. No way. As if Dina sudden forgot to keep up with her evil facade, I saw that she had her mouth open with a dumbfounded expression. Well, it was a justified reaction. Even if it was me, if I was not Ruppaz but the original guy that was in this place, if I saw something like that, I would have called that person a cheater. In any event, it seemed it was more than enough to break Dina's will to fight. I could not feel any more hacky from her. So, do you still want to continue, Dina? I asked her just in case. If she said she was going to continue, I planned to use my fist with blunt edge strike on her. Personally, I did not want to punch a girl, so I would have appreciated it if she surrendered at this point. I would have avoided hitting her face or stomach, but with the opponent being a girl, choosing where to hit in the first place was a bother. I felt like I would be a SCU.M wherever I decided to hit. If the opponent was a guy, I could easily punch his face without holding back. All the more if he was a good-looking guy. I would have hit him more than I needed to, and I would not even stop if he cried. No. It's my loss. However, her reply ended my needless worry. Dina admitted her defeat and sat down on the spot. Good, now I did not have to harm her anymore. Anyways. It really did give me the S.H.I plus Ver. Even if it was fake, I did not think that she would drop down a planet like Venus, __. Author note, some very irrelevant settings. Dawnstar strongest metal attribute map wide AoE arcane magic. It is a famous dropping the meteorite magic that any RPG would at least have one of. Back in the game, the players used to drop the skill here and there without giving a thought to the surroundings. For some reason, even if you used the magic in the room, the meteor will still come down normally. That was the premise of these kinds of magic in the games. In the game, the magic will strangely do no harm to the user, but in this world, the user will also be dragged in normally as you would expect. Normally, there is a cast time and delay before the meteorite comes crash.h.I plus ng down onto the enemy and dealing damage. But by utilizing X-Gate, Dina was able to cheat and turn the skill into instant cast magic with no delay before activation. It's not really important, but it seems the strongest arcane magic of any attribute is renamed into the corresponding planet name. If it was the magic attribute arcane magic, then it will be Triple Grand Hermes, or something like that. 14 Mars. So the name of the strongest fire attribute arcane magic would be me. You're wrong. Author note end, __1 I think, this is showing her excitement to Clitowas written in English in the raw. Second sentence of the incantation is what the LH translation used for the manga. First line was not in the manga. And Dina's skills are named after the charities in Greek mythology. https://n.wikipedia.org/wiki/Cleta. 3. I googled the Vulcan cannon. It looked like a minigun to me. An example would be the M61 Vulcan, a 6-barrel Gatling-style rotary cannon. https://n.wikipedia.org/wiki/m61_Vulcan. 4. Aglaia written in English in the raw.n, Aglaia, Greek, splendor, brilliant, s.h.I plus ning 1, youngest of 3 charities. https://n.wikipedia.org/wiki/Aglaia. 5. Protector of vegetation and plants and growth and fertility. https://n.wikipedia.org/wiki/Hori #first_triad. 6. Ro used Migres and Misu.ia.s.sum. That was a typo and author meant Merak because it makes sense in the context, unless I missed something while I was translating. 7. IAS.sum. The author's trying to say support, magic type, and a tank, frontliner. For those not used to MMO genre, there's 3 types of character/player/CLA.s.s. Tank, DPS, and support. Tank does little damage but can take a lot of hit. Their job is to prevent damage from hitting the allies and to keep others alive. DPS, damage per second, is damage dealer like Ruppaz, does a lot of damage but doesn't take damage for others or support other players, job is to kill everything. Support are backliners like healers, e.g. Merak, who support and heal others and to keep others alive. Author is saying even if support players like Merak and Migres attacked Ruppaz, Ruppas won't really take much damage at all. 8. Refer to footnote 10. Backline character like Dina is focused on magic attacks, and do very little, if any, physical damage. 9. Literally meaning striking with the back of the sword. Please let me know if I prefer blunt edge strike, current, or sword back strike. Raw. 10. Explanation of typical MMO mechanics. Most MMO splits the attacks into physical attacks / damage and magical attacks / damage. Meaning for defense, there's physical armor / defense and magical armor / defense. Most of the time Magicuzers like mage, healer, support have equipments that boost magic attacks / heals, magical, and magic armor / defense. The magic users often, not always, have a low movement speed and low survivability and low physical defense. They often have very little way to counter physical attackers that have already gotten close to them, and thus they are considered weak against physical attacks in close range. Author is saying Ruppas's equipment gives her a 50% damage reduction against all arcane magic attacks, and she is able to negate all negative debuffs associated with specific elements, e.g. fire / burn, lightning / paralysis, water / slow. Furthermore, she is able to easily close in the distance onto the magic users with her gap closer skills and do a lot of burst physical damage, high damage in short amount of time, before the magic user is able to get away, e.g. teleport away. 11. Test players are usually given max level avatar by the developers and don't really play the game to that level. They just test for bugs and glitches and report them back to the company. 12. Useful translations. Translation, Chapter 15, Dawnstar 1314. So, I hope you will tell me now why you did something like this. I asked this question to a depressed Dina with a slightly strong tone. I was not particularly angry at the time. However, if I asked her softly, there was a chance that she would try and deceive me again. After all, there were times where presence was important. I was a test player that arrived in this world just around Midgard year 2800, which was right around when you were sealed. When I had come to, I was in this situation where I had somehow possessed the avatar that I was playing and had already arrived in this world. That part was the same as me. I had also ended up in this world by possessing the avatar, Ruppa's Muffle, that I was using. But those were the information that I already knew about and not the ones I wanted to find out. As such, I stayed quiet and urged her to continue with her story. Back then, there were still a lot of strong people. Of course, it wasn't quite as much as in the game where there was numerous level 1000 players who had doped themselves. But there were still quite a lot of strong people that would be comparable to level 500 players in the game. What? Is it not like that anymore? Yes. Also, some players. More specifically, players whose name was not mentioned in the novel had disappeared without a trace, as if they never existed in the first place. So in my opinion, we're currently not in the game but in the world where the game had been written into a novel. I involuntarily bit my lower lips when I heard this. That was pretty bad. And if you asked me why it was bad, it was because there were not many people who would be mentioned when the story in the game was turned into a novel. The reason for that was because, compared to a large number of players in the game, there were clearly a smaller and limited number of authors. Therefore, with the exception of fanfiction writers being paid a large commission, small events or adventures were mostly not turned into a novel form. Alternatively, there was a very limited number of events that automatically got included in the official novel series. Needless to say, besides the 7 heroes, there were still a few other level 1000 players that had left their names in the official story. There were, but the number of them barely reached 3 digits. Additionally, there were high-level freelance players who did not become my citizens. There were those who thought, isn't it cool to be able to move in the shadows without being mentioned in the lore and stories? Such players, who were dedicated to playing the game without being involved in the novels, probably would not be here. There were also avatars designed in such a way that it would have breached copyright laws. Naturally, including them in the official novel series was out of the question too. In other words, even though Xgate Online's worldwide constant player base reached tens of thousands, the majority of them never even existed in this world in the first place. There was no other person that was in the same circuitous as I was. Everyone acted as if they were the original inhabitants of this world. No, the reality was, for them, that really was the case. The only irregular to have existed in this world was me and me alone. How about the possibility that you just didn't notice it but there were others with your circuitous? That may have been possible. But now, there's no way of verifying that. Did Dina get mentioned in the novel even though she was a test player? Well, that was an irrelevant question at this point. What was important was to try and ask her about what happened in the past. I could always ask about the novel series later on. But, even then, all those people were the small number of acquaintances that I made since I came to this world. At the very least, their names were the last remnants of the real world that I knew of. But everyone, said away, didn't they? Yes. Hearing that, I wanted to sigh instinctively. Ah, I see. I guessed it could not be helped that they lost. To begin with, it was an issue that I should have thought about from the very start. If it remained just like in the game where there were more than 1 million high-level players. Even if the enemy was the Demon King himself, it was not plausible for the humanoids to lose 3. Think about it for a moment. Even Dina who fought me just then was base level 1000 who had not doped herself. Now imagine the scene where there were million Dinas present, and they all used Dawnstar at the same time. There was no way you would be able to guard against something like that. Back in the game, excluding wartime, the maximum party size was set as 12 people. In other words, there was no way for 13 or more people to simultaneously challenge the Demon King. But something like that would not have mattered in this world. All you had to do was to challenge him with 1 million high-level people and crush him to death. The fact that they lost without doing so meant that it could not be done. With that point alone, I needed to overturn my underlying assumption that this was a world within a game. Nevertheless, I was unable to reach that conclusion. I was mortified. I felt hatred. Even the final remnants of the real world that I knew was stolen from me. The feeling of the world that I knew being violated was painful beyond anything else to me. The other demons aside, with just me alone, there was no way for me to win against the Demon King. Although I managed to infiltrate them as one of the 7 luminaries due to their disorder and then I sabotaged from within to delay their invasion, that was all that I could manage. That's when you thought of 12 heavenly stars and me, huh? Yes. I remembered that there was a young girl who was no different from a background in Moffel Tower, so I took her place. And I thought that if I could skillfully lead you to fight against the Demon King, you would be able to defeat him. It was there again. I felt that uncomfortable feeling from before again. Was there anything strange or out of place in what Dina just said? I thought that there was nothing in particular that I should point out, but... well, whatever. I'd just continue listening to her. And what was the true meaning of Jupiter's scream? At the time specified by him, I was to take Libra-sama away. I promised him that I would create 20 minutes of time for him. Yet, I broke that promise and brought back Libra-sama whilst he was still in the city. As he screamed out, I had planned to lure him into a trap from the very start. I see, no wonder he was able to show up the instant Libra went away. It seemed that was only possible because Dina was pulling the strings from behind. As a side note, when Libra first spotted Jupiter, he was moments away from coming in contact with Dina. That contact was probably set up for the purpose of some information exchange. Anyways, the next question will be the last. In the end, are you my enemy? No, I don't have any plan to be hostile. Through the moment I tried to use you, it would not be strange for you to take that as a sign of hostility. To my question, Dina's answer was a no. She had planned to use me, but there was no direct hostility from her. I crossed my arms and thought deeply, using a brain that was by no means fast. The main issue was how to deal with Dina after all this. Honestly speaking, there was no option to outright kill her here and now. Whatever happened, I was taken care of by her, nor could I come to hate her. Whether she was using me or not, a debt of gratitude was still a debt. If she was not there, I would not have known what to do and have gotten lost on the way. Notwithstanding, if I just let her go free, then I would not know what she would do in the future. If she started getting the countries of Svalin or Gjallarhorn involved for the sake of defeating the Demon King, then I would not be able to stand it. It could not be helped. Then it's fine. Continue serving me. I said I'll let this incident slide and forget about it. Dina had deceived and used me. But what about it? Did her deception cause me any harm whatsoever? Did I suffer a single detriment as a result of her deception? No, none. Let alone a single detriment, I benefited a lot as a result. Furthermore, Dina's aim was to kill the Demon King, and in truth, it was not that different from the intention I had. Indeed, I did not feel like I should actively go and kill him, but as long as I remained Rupaz, I was unable to escape eventually clas.h.I+ng with the Demon King. So in this particular situation, it was advantageous for me to take in Dina, who was connected to the inner workings of the enemy. Is that fine? I don't mind. I was helped a lot in this world and owe a debt to you, after all. I'm not short-tempered enough to ignore all that and dispose of you before I pay back my debt. Not to mention. I curled my lips a bit and looked down at Dina, who looked dumbfounded. An advisor who may be hiding some secret, I think that's interesting on its own. In a way, to have someone dangerous as a subordinate is an exciting scenario. You're really a player on the inside, right? And not the Rupasama herself, who has the memory of a player. Haha, well, who knows? Our memories have been crossing over for too long and too often, so even I've started to recognize that I've changed and may not be one or the other. Personally, I can't even distinguish if what I'm currently thinking belongs to Rupaz or the player. Right. I was probably no longer the original me anymore. I did not feel a thing about killing a living thing, nor did I have any hesitation in getting into a fight. Neither of those was reactions that I would have felt. However, it was also different for Rupaz. At the very least, I was still unable to be as cold-hearted or vicious as Rupaz was described in the stories I have heard. For instance, if I really was the real Rupaz, at the very least, Dina's head would have flown off by now. Well, it's a good degree of mixture from both sides. Probably. Either way, my individuality had not been extinguished and I was able to continue maintaining my own consciousness, so there was still nothing to fear. Above all else, it's a long-awaited meeting between the people from the same world. I can look the other way for some mischief. In the end, neither Megrez nor Merak was from the same world as me. With the way things were going, the inside of Bennett Nash was also unlikely to be a player. Which meant that in this world, Dina and I were the only two people to be irregular. I extended my hands to Dina, who was still sitting down on the ground, and laughed. Come with me. And use your knowledge and power, and for the sake of me. For a while, Dina looked at the hands stuck out to her with an idiotic expression on her face. But eventually, she looked up at me and raised her voice with overflowing joy and enthusiasm. As expected of Rupasama. You were a person just as I expected, no, more than I expected. Without a doubt, the person who will defeat the Demon King and unite this world can only be you. Well, no, I don't really have the intention of unifying the world, but... Ignoring what I was thinking in my head, Dina took my hands that were extended and stood up. I have received and heard the decree. I hereby comply. Milady. Until the day you defeat the Demon King, I will remain as your advisor. I'll be relying on you just as before. As you command. Dina and I strongly shook hands with each other. Subsequently, I looked behind me. What I saw was Ares and the others, who had probably reacted to the magic power heading to my location. Now then, how should I fool them? The Sky King Merak was sitting on the throne. At that moment, there were few white-winged men making an appeal. All of those were the men who actively formed the volunteer army to crush the Black Town and start a rebellion, notwithstanding that they were induced to some degree by Jupiter's words. The men were ceaselessly shouting their excuses in front of the throne, even though they had not received the permission to speak from Merak. This was yet another sign that Merak was not respected in his position as the king. King, please, this is too much. We were only doing what we thought was the best for the country. That's right, everything was for the best of the country. Yeah, we were fooled by the demon, but to begin with, it only happened because we tried to normalize this country in your stead. They continued to string stories and excuses that could not be called anything other than rude remarks. They were looking down on him. They had the conviction that even with all their remarks, the king would not display any will of his own. They believed that they would not be punished. They believed that at worst, they would only be put under house arrest for a while. They had believed it so and were in contempt. As such, even the people that should have been trying to stop them from talking out of the line did not do anything to stop them. Each individual had their own dissatisfaction towards the weak attitude displayed by the king. And that was the evidence that they were looking down and making light of the position of the king. Merak quietly closed his eyes and pondered. The one that allowed them to become like this was himself. It was his weak attitude that welcomed those people's impudence. As such, the one that had to correct them out of that character had to be none other than himself. Once he decided this, a heavenly pressure that overwhelmed and pushed everything down was activated on that place. You lot! Who gave you the permission to open your noisy mouths? 4 Alba chapter 16 page 24 manga. At that moment, everyone in that place was salted by the pressure as if they were held down by a large hand. It was the coercion skill, available to every Flugels as an innate racial ability that allowed them to suppress others. 5 Originally used to domesticate animals and magical beasts, it was called the power gifted by the G.O.ds. Ever since they were born, they had never felt this much violent pressure on themselves. It was the heaviness of the king that was only possible because it was used by the level 500 Merak. Being subjected to that for the first time in their lives, they were made to recognize that the existence before their eyes was the Sky King. Let alone run your mouths, I don't believe I've even given you the permission to raise your heads. Yet, you lot have ignored that and started speaking out of place, and now, you've even reached a point of s.h.I plus fting the blame and making me take responsibility. Hey, you lot! I suppose I can take that as the cue that you don't mind losing your heads for the crime of insulting the king, huh? The men who were exposed to the coercion started finally shaking in fear and breaking out in cold sweats. They wanted to say no. They wanted to shake their heads side to side. But they could not. They were in so much fear that they could not even do something that simple. I've been very tolerant towards you fools until now. When you lot started trickling in and said that you lost your homes, I allowed you to stay, and I even gave you a town. I permitted some rudeness and allowed you to conduct yourself without fear. But, it seems I was wrong. The pressure increased even more. Now that it had come to this point, it was no different from violent oppression. Those that were subjected to the coercion could hardly breathe. And even the nearby knights and ministers who were not directly subjected to it started breathing heavily whilst their knees shook uncontrollably with fear. Do not be mistaken into thinking that I will be kind forever. Merak's eyes appeared to be like the predatory birds. Overwhelming disparity. The gap in the ability that could not be filled. Everyone in that place instinctively reacted and cowered in fear. Scary, terrifying. The king that they had believed to be weak and assertive up to that point suddenly became far more terrifying than any demon. Once the pressure weakened and they regained some of their freedom, the action those men took was to prostrate. They stuck their heads onto the floor and begged for the king to have mercy whilst their teeth clattered. It was not only them. Even the ministers and knights were taking the posture and attitude of submission. They had no option to not do so. They had misunderstood until now. This man was the king. He was the king of the sky and the one who ruled over all those that possessed wings. 6 As Merak looked down on the people who had submitted to him, he somehow managed to push back down a sigh down his throat. As I thought, I disliked things like this. The feeling of stepping down on the others did not make me feel good. However, it was my duty and my obligation to make sure my citizens did not look down on the position of the king. And in the first place, we were in the position that we were in, because I neglected that obligation. In other words, I was merely fulfilling my duty and paying back the debt I owed. This is fine, right, Rupas? There are still a lot I have to worry about, but I'm all right now. There are still mountains worth of problems that I have to deal with, but I will show you that I can handle and overcome them. I will not make you out to be the foolish clown. So please, don't worry about me and keep moving forward. Thinking of his friend from the past who had probably long left his country by now, a grin surfaced on Merak's face. He was determined to become a person that he could be proud of by the next time they met. Although a little of the unreliable look remained, the face of the man who had decided as such looked quite dependable. 7 Merak looking dignified __. Author note, 10 minutes later 8 Chapter 40 Author footnote, translation, top, above the arrow people that was from the White Town. Left, in spiky box Rupa's dash. Right, on the head Merak, author note end, __1 refer to Chapter 1 of manga, Chapter 1 page 7, or novel, Ctrl+F novel system, for the explanation of the novel system. 2. If you are not aware of how Merpage character creations work, character creation of most of the famous and well-made Merpage nowadays allow you to create and customize your own avatar in such a way you can create a very detailed and specific look you want. It can range from basic stuff like the color of your eyes/hair, body proportion, height, to very specific things like hairstyle, size of your fingers, angle of your eyes/eyebrows, etc. etc. And of course there are players who create their character into something that looks very much like a real-life celebrity, anime, manga, or fictional characters. Bringing back to context, if the publishers of the X-Gate game were to use those characters and describe them in the official novel, it would be in breach of some copyright law. If you are still can't figure out how Merpage's character customization works, please Google ___ character creation and replace ___ part with one of the following games: Blade and Soul, Blade Desert Online, Revelation Online, and Ion. 3. So, it's not a mistranslation. Above it says tens of thousands, here it says million. There are 2 options. 1. The constant player base means active players, whereas this million refers to the entire population/player base. In MMO, there's often dead players/character, dead player referring to players that don't play frequently or have already quit the game. Dead characters often refer to alts, which are players secondary and characters that don't get played often. The author is probably referring to every character when he says million. 2. The author just can't count. 3. 4 Picture from a Wild Last Boss appeared, manga chapter 16 page 24, source of English translation, LH translation. 5. Coercion was used in Shuram's translation. Intimidation was used by LH translation. 6. Merak used Hoshoku no Haki/Ryutsu. Critical hit. It's super effective. 7. Picture from light novel of the series. 8. Picture from the web novel chapter 40 in author footnote. The link at the start of the chapter. ___.